Greetings, members of the Omicronian Menace and fellow citizens of the multiverse. I am Orange Joe, and this is my deck building guide for Animation Throwdown, the Quest for Cards. A quick disclaimer before I begin. I am not the final or ultimate authority on AT strategy or deck building. If you happen to disagree with my analysis, I encourage friendly discussion and debate and exchange of ideas with other AT players. This deck building guide will be organized into 5 main sections. First, I'll talk about 4 different categories of decks. Then I'll briefly discuss deck size, followed by the different types of cards you'll find in Animation Throwdown. Section 4, Deck Composition, will take up the majority of my analysis. I will not tell you what cards specifically to use. Instead, I will tell you what types of cards to use and in what proportions. And I'll end my analysis by giving my thoughts on when and how often to fuse your cards. I'll begin the analysis by organizing decks into 4 general categories. The first type of deck I call a kitchen sink deck. I took the name from the old saying, everything but the kitchen sink. Essentially, it is the 25 best cards in your inventory. It is not ideal except as a temporary deck or for farming. And if it must be used, ideally, all the combos should be researched and all the cards in the deck should be in the correct ratio. The second and probably most common type of deck in AT are what I call trait decks. Trait decks use cards that either have or grant traits such as drunk, athletic, fighter, or one of the many other traits in AT. These decks attempt to take advantage of one of the many rotating battleground effects, or BGEs. The third type of deck I call strategy decks, although that might not be the best name for them. Strategy decks attempt to win through some sort of card synergy as opposed to high power or a trait. Although in the current state of the game, strategy decks tend to be a bit more theoretical. The fourth type of deck, defense decks, I only mention for completeness. Since they operate under a completely different principle, I will not be discussing them today and save them for another time. Now that we've talked about the different types of decks, I want to briefly discuss deck size. When it comes to deck size, in general, always use a 25 card deck, never 26 or more. The reason being is that the more cards in your deck, the lower your chances are of pulling your most powerful cards. Your most powerful card could be an epic, a legendary, or a mythic. For myself, my most powerful card is my mythic Leela. Using some quick and dirty back of the envelope type math, the odds of me having my mythic Leela in my opening hand are about 1 in 5 or 20%. As you add more cards to your deck, the chances of drawing your most powerful card drop to about 1 in 7 or 14% at 35 cards. So to maximize your chances of getting your best cards, stick with the minimum size of 25. In AT, cards can be divided into many different types. If you go to the inventory and click Filter, you can see many of them here. At the top, we have Rarity, Common, Rare, Epic, Legendary, and Mythic. Underneath that are the 11 different traits. Next is the Fusion level, which we'll discuss at the end. Then is TV Show. And finally, Skills, which we'll get into during card composition. But the filter screen does not show the most important way cards are divided: characters, items, and power cards. Only characters can form combos with items. Characters cannot combo with other characters, and items cannot combo with other items. And power cards, or pre-combos, cannot form combos at all because they are already a combo. You can recognize a power card by the blue and red swirl at the top, while characters are named characters from a show, and items are generally inanimate objects. This distinction is important because while all cards have a TV show, when comboed, it retains the show of the character and loses the show of the item. Conversely, very few characters have traits, while the majority of items do, and the items generally bestow one or more traits to the character. So now that deck types, size, and card types have been covered, we can move on to deck composition. Now these are more guidelines rather than hard and fast rules. I routinely break my own rules, but it's a good starting point. First, all non-power cards should be divided equally between character cards and item cards. Since characters don't combo with other characters, and items don't combo with other items, getting a hand full of only characters or only items can cost you the game. Reduce this possibility by keeping the ratio of characters to items as equal as possible. Since 25 doesn't divide by 2, having 13 characters and 12 items, or vice versa, is okay. Having 12 of each and 1 power card is better. Having 11 of each and 3 power cards is okay too. Basically, as long as you have equal numbers of characters and items, you can fill up the rest with power cards. Next, we have to determine what cards and what items we should put in our deck. Should we limit ourselves to just 1 character and 1 item, like 12 Peggies and 12 rifles? Or should we put in 12 different characters and 12 different items? Or something in between? That depends on what type of deck you're building. If you're building a kitchen sink deck because you have a limited selection of cards, just put in your 12 best characters and your 12 best items as long as they all combo. But we really don't want to build a kitchen sink deck because they don't take advantage of the battleground effects or the starred abilities. The game's developers routinely come out with new battleground effects, or BGEs. Any cards or combos with the matching trait get significant bonuses. Trait decks use 12 item cards that grant or bestow the matching trait to the character. It doesn't really matter what item cards or what character cards you use in a trait deck, as long as they match the BGE and they combo well with the characters. Starred abilities, on the other hand, are support skills such as cheer, shield, and heal that only affect a card or combo with a certain trait or from a certain TV show. Sister Peter is a good example as it has both types of starred abilities. While there are many support skills that affect any or all friendly cards, regardless of trait or show, the majority are limited to a particular show or trait. Trait decks, in addition to gaining the BGE bonuses, are also able to take full advantage of any starred abilities that target that trait. Moreover, if we limit our selection of character cards to just 3 shows or less, we can then start to take advantage of the starred abilities that target particular TV shows. That's because combos retain the show of the character and not the item. Such a deck may be considered a strategy deck, or perhaps a hybrid deck of trait and strategy. Applying the guidelines I've outlined so far, a crude sample deck might look something like this. In this example, I'm building a disguised trait deck to match a disguised BGE. First, I selected 12 item cards with the same trait that match the BGE. Then, I select characters from only 3 TV shows. Here's an example of what that deck might look like in action. See how the 2 mommy-mummy combos can actually shield each other and heal each other, and no one else. Of course, BGEs change and rotate, So when a new BGE comes in, take out the old items and put in new items. Only change the characters if they don't combo with the items. Here, I swapped out the disguised cards for armed cards for a new armed BGE. Tina and Boomhauer can stay, but Brian would have to be swapped because he doesn't combo with the rifle. If you noticed, in the examples I used max quad fused cards. Ultimately, your goal should be a deck full of max quad fused cards. But a common mistake I often see are new players fusing their cards too soon and going for a quad as soon as they have 4 copies. Quad fused cards are awesome, but only having 1 or 2 does you little good. If you're just starting out and all you have are commons and rares, avoid upgrading your cards as much as possible and only upgrade and fuse the cards you need to farm epics. Once you can farm epics, go ahead and upgrade them, but don't fuse them until you have enough to make a decent trait deck. Once you have somewhere in the ballpark of 6 to 12, then start fusing. In the past, an unfused legendary was weaker than a fused epic, but after the recent buff to legendary cards a few weeks ago, an unfused legendary is as good as a quad fused epic. So go ahead, upgrade them, and use them as soon as you can. But just like the epics, wait until you have a sufficient quantity of legendary cards before fusing.